Hi, I'm JR. This video will be about what perception is and how it is important. In other words, what I mean by perception and how it's important to me and how it may also be important to you. So perception is the foundation for how we organize our focus. And I'll talk about how that's true. Based on our perceptions, we organize our focus or our attention. Perception is the foundation for how we organize not just our focus, but also then our activities and our results. So based on what we notice, how we interpret what we notice, and how we react to our interpretations, we get results. So based on a particular perception, we focus on a specific target or interest, and that's whatever target or interest we identify as relevant to whatever we perceive. So again, perception's at the core there. So our continuing perceptions inform the methods that we use for promoting a particular interest, and we identify that interest based on perception. The quality of perception is really what this is about. The basics of what perception is, I assume. This is a startling discovery when I talk to you about what I mean by the word perception, but how perception is important has a lot to do with the quality of perception. So there are different qualities of perception, like how perceptive someone is. The exactness or precision of perception can be very important. We perceive, then we identify a target interest, then we organize our activities around our point of focus, and those activities produce our results. So what governs the results that we produce? Perception rules the results that we produce. It rules our entire life, really. How do we notice what we notice? What do we do about it? Perception's involved in all of that. I want to note here as a contrast that perception is not the same as mere sensation. Perception is inherently interpretive, and here's a simple example. For instance, imagine a couple of people who are sleeping in the same bed. One of them is sleeping without dreaming, and the other is dreaming of being chased by something scary. Their legs are actually moving. Could be, you might have seen an animal do this, a dog or that's your pet. You can see them actually move while dreaming. So in this case, it's a couple of people. One of them's dreaming, and they're dreaming of being chased by something scary. Their legs are actually moving, and they're sweating from the distress. So their perception is producing results in their body in terms of movement. Hormones are involved. There's a whole sequence of things like stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and they're actually sweating. They're experiencing distress, and it's a real perception, but it's very distinct from sensation. Are they being chased? No. Are they in danger? No, not from being chased. They just perceive that they're being chased and are in danger. And there are actual electrical signals that are happening in their brain, and those signals are being interpreted in a particular way. The interpretation happens within the context of their prior perception. So the sequence in the dream influences how the next perception will happen. What's already happened influences how the next perception can happen. A brain, while it's dreaming, will attempt to connect sensations to construct a dream sequence that has some logical continuity. Each new sensation will be interpreted to construct a new perception that fits reasonably well with the prior perceptions in the dream. So you got your prior perceptions in the dream, and then a new sensation. It's going to be interpreted relative to those prior interpretations. There's an attempt to create consistency that happens during dreaming and while awake as well. So back to this idea of someone dreaming. They may hear a sound while dreaming and perceive that it is a phone ringing. So there's a an actual sound, in this case, my example includes an actual sound, and then someone's dreaming and they perceive it to be a phone ringing. But is it a phone ringing? It could be, but they're dreaming, so the accuracy of their perception might not be very high. So then a moment later they wake up because of the sound being so loud, and they realize that the sound they heard was not a phone, but an alarm clock. So first they perceived a phone, and then later they perceived an alarm clock. The sensations didn't change. The sound that they heard didn't change. But how they interpreted those sounds did change. Their perception shifted from relatively inaccurate, this more presumptive, less well-tested perception, to a more accurate perception. So based on the fact that they were dreaming and that there were other things happening in the dream, they're not thinking, I'm asleep and then there's going to be an alarm clock to wake me up. That would be completely contrary to the whole sequence of the dream. In the dream, the general perception is that person is already awake. So they will interpret things within the context of their general context, who they are, what they perceive to have just previously happened. We construct these sequence of presumptions. We construct a sequence of perceptions with our latest perception being informed by our prior perceptions. They might be accurate, they might not, but our prior perceptions inform what we perceive at any later time. So some perceptions are almost totally inaccurate. Some perceptions are moderately inaccurate, and some perceptions are entirely accurate, though there may be different amounts of precision. So this next issue I'll bring up is precision. For instance, imagine 3 thermometers. 2 of them are properly calibrated, at least 2, but the third, maybe it's not calibrated. So one thermometer says 98 degrees. It doesn't have any other digits, just 98. Not 98.0, just 98. And the other says 98.1 degrees. So that's an extra 1/10 of a degree that represents not a conflict with the other thermometer's reading, but just an added element of precision. So it's a more precise measurement, not a conflict with the less precise measurement. And then the third thermometer says 39 degrees. So that last one must be wrong because it differs so much from the other 2, right? Or perhaps that one that says 39 degrees is the only one that's correct, and the other 2 are wrong, even though they have very similar measurements, 98 and 98.1. That's one way to look at it is, well, either those 2 are right and that other one's wrong, or that one's wrong and the other 2, a mutually exclusive orientation. And, of course, they could all be wrong. I didn't mention that yet. So what if the 2 very different readings were both accurate? It's true that some perceptions are more accurate than others, so certainly the 39-degree reading could be completely wrong. But it is possible for 2 very different perceptions or 2 very different interpretations to both be accurate. How can that be? 2 people may accurately view a spiral. So imagine a spiral and 2 people viewing it. So they're viewing it from different angles. One's viewing it from the side, so they see a shape of a wave. So there's the spiraling going by, and it's just the shape of a wave. Another one views the spiraling from straight ahead or straight down, and they see a circle or maybe a looping movement. Both observations may be totally accurate. From that perspective, the wave, 2-dimensionally, is what is seen. And from a different perspective, the looping or the circle is what is seen. So both observations may be totally accurate. The contrast doesn't imply imprecision. They both can be precise. So there's no conflict between those 2 interpretations or perceptions. They're simply a contrast. While I'm on this subject of precision, as a quick aside, is there a right amount of precision? In any particular context, there's a certain amount of precision that's relevant, and that's it. There's no amount of precision that's always right. So less precision than whatever is relevant is better than nothing, and more precision than what is relevant is potentially distracting. It's irrelevant. So it's good to know how much precision is relevant. So back to these three thermometers. I didn't mention yet that one of them was measuring units of Celsius degrees. The other two were measuring Fahrenheit degrees. So the 39 degree measurement, again, it doesn't actually conflict with the 98 or the 98.1 measurement. The 39 degrees were just not the same kind of degrees as the 98 degrees. The measurements were in contrast rather than in conflict. And so here we reach a classic issue of language. Now earlier I talked about a couple of people sleeping in bed, perhaps that same couple. Now they're out shopping at a grocery store. It's a husband and a wife. The wife says to the husband, "Go get 6 eggs." Clear, right? The husband returns soon with 6 cartons of 1 dozen eggs each. That's total of 72 eggs. Go get 6 eggs. He got 6 cartons of 1 dozen eggs each, 72 eggs. The wife said, "I told you that I wanted half a dozen." The husband said, "You said 6, not half a dozen." The wife said, "What are you talking about? You are obviously not listening to me. I clearly said half a dozen." The husband said, "My mistake. You want half a dozen. I apologize." So the husband put back the extra eggs, and life went on. They went up to the cashier. So what was the problem there? The husband got 6 eggs as he understood 6. He did not confirm with the wife whether she meant half a dozen or 6 dozen. He may have simply presumed that she meant 6 dozen, and then he took action based on his sincere presumption. Might have been inaccurate, but could be totally sincere. Or perhaps he was creating a possible conflict on purpose by noticing in advance that she might have meant half a dozen, but then he declined to raise the issue to increase precision. And he just took action knowing that, ooh, here's an opportunity to create a little contrast, conflict, drama, whatever. So sometimes we know that we're making a presumption, and yet we take action anyway. In fact, that's very common. Most of the time we take action, we are aware that there's some amount of presumption involved. We do not always have to verify a presumption before acting. Sometimes taking action is an excellent way to test a presumption, even the best way to test it. You take an action. That's how do you test a presumption? Take an action. So it can be very useful to be aware that presumption is a typical part of life. We usually have several presumptions in operation along with any particular activity that we're doing. So usually we know that some of our presumptions are presumptive, and it's also common to have at least one important presumption that we do not recognize as a presumption at any given point in time. So how do we find out that we've been presumptive? Common sequences for identifying presumptiveness are the experiences of frustration and disappointment. When I presume that a particular method will work for a particular outcome, producing that outcome, but then it doesn't work, then I will naturally experience frustration. Presumably, the amount of frustration that I experience is in proportion to the extent that I care about producing that particular outcome. So if I experience a lot of frustration about something, that's probably because it's important to me. It's at least possible. So further, what if I do produce an outcome, but then I find it not to be as valuable as I had presumed it would be? That would be an example of disappointment. So the husband and wife, right? They were going to the cash register, the cashier. We were talking about, them, the ones that bought 6 ounces of eggs. So things got even more interesting as they were getting ready to pay for their groceries, and they started talking to the cashier there. They selected a cashier. They got in line. Eventually, they got up to speak to the cashier, and the cashier said, "Hello, I hope you found everything you were looking for in the store. Are you enjoying the nice weather today?" And the cashier was mostly paying attention to ringing up the different items, right? And the wife said, "No, because my husband is an idiot who never listens to me." The cashier said, "Good, I'm glad to hear that. Anyway, I just got back from a trip and it was 39 degrees there. Isn't that amazing?" The husband said, "Did you even hear what my wife said? It was like you were not even listening to her." The wife said, 39 degrees? Oh my, that is terribly cold. I cannot stand such cold weather. Yeah. The cashier said, "I was so glad to get back here to where it's nice and cool. I realized 39 degrees Celsius was way too much for me, especially with all the humidity. 39 plus a breeze is not so bad when it is a dry heat, but just don't get stuck in the direct sunlight too long in 39 degrees. I mean, it'll just burn your skin. Unless you're dark-skinned or something. Ooh, it's dangerous. 39 degrees. Ooh." And the husband said, "Where are you going in this conversation?" And the cashier said, "Where? Well, I think next year I'll try Europe." And the wife said, "I totally love Europe. The only problem was all of the tourists." So what guides our perceptions? We've been programmed to be attentive to certain things simply by familiarity, by repetition. For instance, if you've been taught that a particular issue is important to your diet, then you will filter your perceptions about various foods relative to that issue. You've been programmed that a particular issue is important. So then you go out, to the grocery store, and as you evaluate different possible purchases, a particular issue may guide your evaluations, a particular presumption. So once upon a time, someone was programmed to be paranoid about eating foods high in cholesterol because there was perception that such a diet could be detrimental. So whenever they went to select foods, like on a restaurant menu, they're reading the menu, flipping through, or maybe they're in a grocery store, they were evaluating their different options for food based on their programmed paranoia about cholesterol. Oh boy, what should be important to you? I'm jumping off of the subject of programmed paranoias for a moment. Yes, our perceptions and our presumptions influence our presumptions influence our perceptions, but beyond that, what should be important to you? What should you focus on? And what outcomes should you value? Some people may reactively respond to these kinds of questions with announcements about everyone. They may say, everyone should focus on health, or everyone should focus on being a good person by making sure that they have the right amount of cholesterol in their diet, which means not too much. So when people have those kind of reflexive responses about everyone and what everyone should do, they're revealing their programming. They're revealing their presumptions and how they filter perceptions. You can get an idea of, you can observe someone and talk to them about, how they evaluate different things on a menu or different things at the grocery store. You could talk to them, but you could observe, their choices. You could ask them about their background and, what they think is important in choosing food. And if they tell you what everyone should do, they're probably revealing presumptions that they've been programmed to have. So if everyone should do something, that's presumptive. If they say, well, I tested this and this and this, and then I tried this and this and this, and I found that blah, 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 that's probably not programming. That's probably not presumptions. It's still, you could say it's still presumptive, but it's definitely got an element of precision that would be missing from a programmed perception, a programmed evaluation filter in regard to diet or something. So they've researched their own situation. They've measured things themselves. They've tried a couple different things and ongoingly measured various levels of how their body responded to different dietary choices. That's one possible sequence. So when we talk about what everyone should do, though, that's revealing our programming. We may have specific ideas about exactly how everyone should focus on whatever they should focus on. So we not only have these presumptions that we've been programmed to have about what everyone should focus on, but we have presumptions and specific ideas about exactly how everyone should focus on those things. So what if instead of presuming that whatever I've been programmed to think is accurate and relevant, I noticed that programming tends to reduce perceptiveness and even reduce satisfaction. Programming promotes presumptions, and there's no other kind of programming except programming that promotes presumptions. So if there's a system in which a central bureaucracy or central small group selects a sequence of topics that will be brought to the attention of the target audience, we can call that a curriculum committee for schools. A small group selects a sequence of topics to be brought to the attention of the target audience, like a curriculum committee for a school system, or the scheduling department for a TV station. First we'll have a half hour on this, then 2 hours on that, then an hour on that, and then another hour on this other thing, and a half hour on that, and you've got a sequence of topics to be brought to the attention of a target audience. Scheduling department, curriculum committee, we've got a small group selecting the content to be publicized to a larger group. It's very common, actually, that you would have that kind of a dynamic. So will the small group act in conflict with their own perceived interests? So they've got some perceived interests. Are they going to act in conflict with their own perceived interests or in conformity to their own perceived interests? Maybe they'll promote paranoia about cholesterol because a lobbyist has come to their church and insisted that no further research relating to cholesterol is relevant because there are no presumptive presumptions in language. It's simple. So you can see the appeal of the simplicity, right? There are no presumptive presumptions in language, at least not involving that lobbyist that goes to my church because it's my church, and no one in my church would have any presumptions that are presumptive because that would be less simple than if there were only black and white options. Either this or that, nothing in between, no issues of precision, no gray areas of accuracy and relative inaccuracy. So someone may assert that everyone must be indoctrinated about the importance of health because it matters. Everyone must be indoctrinated about the importance of health, especially the value of purchasing statin medications to combat high cholesterol levels. It's very important. Everyone must be indoctrinated about this, and there should be more funding for that. Why do chickens put so much cholesterol into half a dozen chicken eggs? Or 6, depending on how you want to count it. Why so much cholesterol? Are they trying to poison the livers and brains of creatures who ate eggs? Why so much cholesterol? Are they trying to promote hysteria? Is that what these chickens are doing? Trying to promote hysteria by putting all this cholesterol in their eggs? Everyone knows that chickens should not intentionally promote hysteria. Should chickens intentionally promote hysteria? Yes or no? No, right? Everybody knows that. That is a sacred activity, promoting hysteria, which is reserved only for properly licensed scientists and physicians. Only properly licensed scientists and physicians should promote hysteria intentionally. It's sacred. It's very sacred. So is it possible that programming could distract people from their own innate interests? Is it possible that programming could install presumptions in people that are not entirely accurate? Why are billions of livers consistently manufacturing cholesterol? What exactly is cholesterol, and why is it that some people are insisting that they're being chased by demons who threaten to poison them with cholesterol called chickens, and they're in the dream I was running, and it was scary. It was very scary because the chickens they're trying to poison me with things that I manufacture in my own body, whether I eat any of it or not. But it's scary. You just don't understand how scary it was. Do you understand how scary it was? Good. Okay. You probably don't. I know you think you understand how scary it was, but you weren't there. I was there. It was scary. So is hysteria less hysterical if it is very popular? Is a presumption less presumption? Wait, no, that was wrong. Dang it. Is a presumption less presumptive if everyone who is programmed to have that presumption will argue hysterically that it must be true, because otherwise, if one indoctrinated presumption is even slightly inaccurate, then that could mean that Santa Claus intentionally deceived his own children simply to manipulate them into conforming to whatever behavioral standards that Santa Claus was interested in promoting in the target audience. And everyone knows that hysteria should not exist, which is why we must all insist that we have never experienced it personally, because we're just not that kind of person. Basically, we're the other kind of person. Paranoia and hysteria should not be so presumptive and should not be programmed by systems that are specifically designed to program the attention of a target audience and then train them in what hysterias and paranoias to worship, and then direct them in exactly how to properly worship those sacred presumptions, paranoias, and hysterias. That's how things should be. And we need to do more to make things not be so much how they are, but be more how we're programmed to presume that they should be. So the problem with the world today is that there are more than one unit of measuring temperature. In summary, global warming is a fact caused by shifting from the use of Celsius thermometers, which was traditional in many places, to suddenly, all of a sudden, using Fahrenheit thermometers, resulting in the instant boiling of all polar ice on this planet. Because when you shift from Celsius to Fahrenheit, most of the time that's going to result in a big increase in degrees, right? And that's going to burn up the polar ice. So people need to be aware of the dangers of Fahrenheit as a thermometer unit. Okay, so never have we faced a problem so dire as the lack of attention to the nature of language. Language is interpretive. I'm not saying it should be, I'm just saying it is. Probably shouldn't be, but everyone knows that language should not be so interpretive, because if it was, that would be confusing and cause problems. So everyone knows that language should not be so interpretive, and certainly should never be used to form conceptual presumptions, which are quite problematic. So the only problem with presumptions is that some people form presumptions that are more accurate than other presumptions or other people. I don't know, one of those. The only problem with presumptions is that some of them are more accurate than others. That's a problem. That's unfair, first of all. That's just not, it's not fair. So fairness is very important, which is why everyone who's been programmed with the ideal that fairness is very important should be equally crippled by the identical propaganda, so that, it's equal, okay? Now, how can people get an unfair advantage by reforming their quality of their perception? First of all, it's impossible. Second, the way to do it is carefully and quickly, or slowly. So how can people get an unfair advantage by reforming the quality of their perception? I have no idea. I'm pretty sure it's not even impossible. So should they test their presumptions for accuracy? Ever? Should you ever test any of your presumptions for accuracy? No. Why would you ever test your presumptions for accuracy when you could just complain that your sacred methods should be more effective than they actually are, while continuing to use those methods as if they were producing results that you find satisfying and favorable? Why not just complain about the methods? You could probably, have a campaign to reform the results of, like, why should Celsius thermometers be like that? Let's change things for the better. So is it possible for some people, because nobody wants to change things for the worse, right? Come on. So is it possible for some people to be more perceptive than others in regard to the different ways that language can be used, for instance? In addition to actual expertise in regard to various common presumptions programmed by mainstream systems of indoctrinations, such as about cholesterol or mathematics or temperatures, in addition to actual expertise in any of these various areas of common presumptions, what about the ability to notice the underlying patterns in language that correspond to common communication problems? So there's some, let's say, imagine that there are certain patterns of language that correspond to common communication problems, and that some people are more perceptive than others at identifying those patterns in language. Even some people are able to kind of assess which patterns in language are relatively problematic, moderately problematic, and really efficient. really precise. Not a lot of problems. So there's this whole range of things. Well, first of all, that's unfair, because why should different people have different abilities to perceive stuff? That's, I was talking to the psychic the other day, and I found that I was really nervous because I thought they can know what I'm thinking, right? And I didn't like that at all. So I told them that, I had another appointment scheduled and I had to go. So it didn't seem like they believed me though. Anyway, is it possible for some people to be more perceptive than others in regard to the different ways that language can be used? No. Good, we got that out of the way. Is it possible for some, I'm reading here just a second. Is it possible for some people to be more perceptive than others in regard to how to use language effectively? Could it be attractive to be able to notice ineffective methods of using language and then to efficiently introduce relevant methods of using language that are remarkably more effective at producing results that are actually attractive? Not just that should be attractive, but that are actually attractive. So perhaps certain results should be valuable according to program presumptions of what should be valuable, right? But you presume that the results would be valuable to you personally rather than only valuable to the small group of programmers who benefit from those results. This is great right here. We're programmed that certain results are valuable or should be valuable. Okay. But to whom? They should be valuable to me. That's my presumption. I'm told that they should be valuable. So I value them, and then I expect them to be satisfactory and produce results that I value. But what if they don't? What if the fact is they're being called valuable in the programming? What if certain results are being called valuable in the programming because they're valuable to the small group of programmers who benefit from the production of those results consistently and efficiently? Is it possible that a small group of programmers created a system of programming in order to program large groups to focus on certain things in certain ways, to perceive certain things, and to behave in ways that benefit the small group in response to their interpretatives and in response to their programmed interpretations of the things that they were programmed to focus on? The idea that I just mentioned can be dismissed as hysterically paranoid. Why? Because it is insulting to suggest that there is such a thing as naivety, or to suggest that I personally could have any experience with naivety. That's insulting, isn't it? I'm insulted by that idea, not because of any concern that it might be accurate or relevant, or that I might have, any naivety. No. I am insulted by that idea because of tremendous confidence in my own intelligence and accuracy. That's why I'm insulted, because of confidence. Yeah. So that's why I hysterically argue with anyone who references any of my presumptions as if they were in any way presumptive. If you suggest that my sacred presumptions are presumptive, that's a problem. You see? Okay? So presumptions are bad. So I shouldn't have any, which is why I certainly do not. The idea that Santa Claus would intentionally deceive his own children in order to efficiently influence their behavior is insulting, hysterical, naive, and paranoid. That's not how Santa is. Okay, I met him personally. I know that Santa Claus is a good person because he gave me a free sample of a statin drug to improve my health by damaging my liver's ability to produce poisonous cholesterol. That's the kind of guy he is. The idea that Santa acted out of his own selfish interest when giving me a free sample of a drug that's saying that he's selfish, and that just ruffles my feathers. If I was a chicken and I had feathers, it would ruffle them. Okay, so people should not be selfish. Therefore, Santa Claus was not selfish, and just because he also sells statin drugs for a huge profit over the cost of production, that does not imply that he is selfish when refusing to sell those drugs for less than the full retail price, except with that first free sample. This is, people don't understand. We start with the conclusion that has been programmed that Santa Claus is not selfish because he shouldn't be, because everyone should, and then you want to try and put on top of that some information about how he's being manipulative intentionally and deceptive. That's ridiculous. What if hysteria is a word for the process of a presumptively naive paranoia dissolving? So I'll phrase that now differently. First, there's a paranoia, and the paranoia is presumptively naive, and then it dissolves. And that's called hysteria. So first, there's a paranoia that is presumptively naive, and then it dissolves through some patterns that we call hysteria. So hysteria is like an indicator of pre-existing presumptive paranoia of naivety, which that's insulting. Okay, so by the way, if you know anybody, not yourself, but if you know other people who have paranoia and hysteria and stuff like that, I know a guy who sells some drugs that fix that. As for whether they are very cheap drugs sold to the government for a very high price and then given to you for free, look, that's the kind of question that a hysterical, paranoid person would ask. So I find that disrespectful, if you even are thinking of that. Just because I brought it up, you still shouldn't be thinking of it, okay? In case you raise any concerns of that nature, we will make a note to start you at a very high dose. High dose, very high, seriously. So why? Because the government loves you very much and would never do anything that is in the interest of a small select group and contrary to your own best interests. If, on the rare occasion, you ever perceive that there is a government program that is not in the best interests of all participants, such as the state lottery, then simply notify the relevant government of your concerns, and the government will provide you free correctional programming to train you in the best way to correct any programs of government-sponsored injustice. Because it's your moral responsibility as a heroic, perfectionist patriot to compensate for your, fundamental unworthiness, to correct and reform governments to make them how they should be, according to their own propaganda. Make them how they should be, because it's your moral responsibility, and then you'll get into heaven and stuff and avoid eternal tortures in hell. It's your moral responsibility as a heroic, perfectionist patriot to make sure that no government on this planet has any programs that disproportionately benefit special interest groups. Please immediately report to your local government licensed mental hospital to begin anti-presumption treatment to remedy and prevent the inattentive use of presumptive language. Why are you waiting for me to say? I gave you an instruction, okay? Go. Immediately report to them, those people, to get the stuff that you need, because you need it. You do, really. Or you know what? Maybe you don't need it. But this information, you might want to share it with some other people because they need it.